Every gilded cage is built with walls of comfort. The only question is what you're paying for them.
You ever get that feeling, that little nagging thought in the back of your head, asking, are the choices you make, the things you believe, even what you want, are they really, truly yours?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe, just maybe, they're being subtly guided by forces you don't even see.
Right.
Well, today we're doing a deep dive into the mind of someone who didn't just think guiding those forces was possible. He actually argued it was, essential for society to even work.
We're talking Edward Bernays, often called the father of modern public relations, and his incredibly influential but also really controversial 1928 book, Propaganda.
Yeah, Propaganda. Even the title grabs you, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And his big idea in there, the engineering of consent, well, it's one of those concepts that once you grasp it, you start seeing it everywhere. It's kind of wild.
So what's our mission today? What are we digging into?
Well, our mission is really to unpack Bernays' original ideas, which were pretty audacious for their time. We want to trace how they evolved, from the early days of mass media right up to now, and show how this invisible government he described shaped things then and honestly continues to shape our world now.
Through PR, marketing, politics.
Exactly. All of that. And especially now in the digital world we all live in, the algorithms, the platforms, it's Bernays on steroids in a way.
And we've got a lot to draw on, right? We're not just looking at Bernays in isolation.
No, definitely not. We've pulled together a whole range of sources. We've got historical texts, obviously, but also modern analysis from psychology, economics, media studies, and some really cutting-edge critiques looking at AI and digital control mechanisms.
So it's going to be quite a journey. From the roaring 20s straight into, whatever you call today's algorithmic age.
It really is. And what's striking, I think, is how Bernays' ideas, nearly 100 years old now, still feel so relevant sometimes. Uncomfortably relevant.
Yeah.
He wasn't just theorizing. He was laying out a blueprint, a practical guide. He came right out and said it pretty starkly. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society.
Wow. Okay, hold on. An important element in democratic society. That sounds completely counterintuitive. He's saying democracy needs manipulation to function.
That's exactly what he's saying, and he doubled down on it. He argued that the people who do this manipulating, the ones who understand and use this unseen mechanism of society, they actually form an invisible government, and that this invisible government, that's the true ruling power.
The invisible government.
That's good.
That's a phrase that sticks with you, like puppet masters behind the scenes.
Kinda. And he wasn't subtle about it. He had that famous quote right. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of.
It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like something out of a conspiracy thriller.
It does, but for Bernays, this wasn't some dark secret, it was just how things worked. A practical reality of managing a large, complex society.
Okay, so he saw this invisible government, not as sinister necessarily, but as a functional requirement. But why? Why did he think manipulation was so crucial? What was the justification?
That's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, really controversial. His rationale wasn't about power for power's sake, or at least that's not how he framed it. He saw mass society, with all its competing voices and opinions, as fundamentally chaotic, bewildering even.
Okay.
And he believed this engineering of consent was necessary to bring order to that chaos, to prevent society from just fragmenting, becoming ungovernable, basically. He genuinely seemed to fear that without this kind of expert guidance, things would fall apart.
So preventing societal breakdown, that's a pretty big claim from public relations.
Yeah.
Was it just about social order, or was there more to it, like economically?
Oh, absolutely. He tied it directly to the economy, specifically the rise of mass production. Think about it. Factories were suddenly churning out huge quantities of identical goods.
Right, Fordism, assembly lines.
Exactly. And Bernays argued, pretty logically, that mass production is only profitable if its rhythm can be maintained. You can't just produce millions of cars or radios and hope people decide to buy them. You need steady, predictable demand.
You have to create the demand.
Precisely. You have to actively shape desires. You need to suggest tastes, form ideas, make people want the things being produced. So for Bernays, manipulating public opinion wasn't just about politics. It was fundamental to keeping the whole modern industrial economy humming along. It was about selling products, yes, but also selling lifestyles, ideas, maybe even the idea of consumerism itself.
It's like he saw the public mind is just another part of the industrial machine, something that needed to be managed and optimized for efficiency. But this obviously leads us to the darker side of his legacy. He's credited with inventing modern PR, but he also got this dubious reputation, didn't he? It seems his ideas cast a long shadow.
They really did. The ethical questions are huge, and they become pretty chilling when you look at history. Maybe the most disturbing connection is the fact that Bernays' writings, especially propaganda, were found in Joseph Goebbels' personal library.
Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister.
The very same. Sources suggest Goebbels studied Bernays' techniques closely. He leveraged the lessons learned, as one analysis puts it, to help engineer the massive shift in public opinion in Germany. That shift paved the way for fascism, for the dehumanization of minorities, and ultimately for the Holocaust.
That is horrifying. The idea that techniques designed for, say, selling soap could be twisted to justify genocide.
It's a terrifying illustration of the power involved, isn't it? It shows how these tools for shaping minds, if used without any ethical compass, can lead to unimaginable outcomes. It really underscores the dark potential inherent in these ideas.
Definitely. It makes understanding this stuff feel less academic and more urgent. So, okay, Bernays basically gives us the blueprint. How powerful groups can shape what we think and feel. Not through force, but by tapping into our psychology. Guiding our desires almost.
Exactly right. His work was a major turning point. It shifted persuasion away from just making direct appeals towards a more, sophisticated understanding of the group mind, how people behave in crowds, how social pressures work.
Right.
He was laying the groundwork for everything we now see in advanced PR, modern advertising, even psychological operations, PSYOPS. It was a move from overt control to a much more subtle, almost invisible management of public thought and feeling. Less dictating, more directing the flow.
And if Bernays wrote the blueprint, then modern campaigns, commercial, political, you name it, have built massive, intricate structures based on it. This invisible government idea really snaps into focus when you look at how traditional media and PR work today. It's not just an idea anymore, it's a system.
It absolutely is. And a really useful way to analyze that system, even today, is Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman's propaganda model. They developed it back in 1988, but it's still incredibly relevant for understanding how mass media, even in supposedly free and democratic societies, tends to manufacture consent.
Manufacture consent, meaning they shape public opinion to align with the interests of the powerful.
Essentially, yes. And they argue it happens not through some grand conspiracy, usually, but through the very structure of the media system itself. They identified 5 filters that news has to pass through, and these filters systematically shape the output.
Okay, 5 filters. What are they? Let's break them down.
Right. The first one is ownership. Who owns the major media outlets? Increasingly, it's massive corporations or very wealthy individuals. Their core interest is profit, market stability. So the news coverage naturally tends to reflect those corporate interests.
Okay, so the boss's worldview filters down. Makes sense. What's number 2?
Number 2 is advertising. Where does most media revenue come from? Advertisers. This gives advertisers huge leverage. Media outlets need to create content that's advertiser-friendly. You're not likely to see fierce criticism of, say, the fossil fuel industry on a network heavily sponsored by oil companies.
Right. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. Okay, filter 3.
Third is sourcing. Where do journalists get their information quickly and cheaply? Often it's from official sources, government press briefings, corporate PR departments, think tanks funded by special interests. These powerful entities can essentially subsidize the news by providing ready-made information, framing the narrative from the start. Independent, investigative journalism is expensive and time-consuming by comparison.
So the official story gets amplified just because it's easier and cheaper to report. Got it. Number 4.
Number 4 is flack. This is basically negative feedback. If a media outlet publishes a story that powerful interests don't like, they can face flack complaints, lawsuits, pressure on advertisers, organized campaigns to discredit them. Flack acts as a disciplinary mechanism. It makes journalists and editors think twice before crossing powerful lines.
It's like a subtle form of censorship through intimidation. Okay, and the last one, filter number 5.
The 5th is ideology. Originally, Chomsky and Herman focused on anti-communism during the Cold War, but it's broader now. It represents the underlying assumptions and beliefs of the society that are taken for granted: belief in free markets, patriotism, consumerism. News that stays within these ideological boundaries is considered objective, while perspectives that fundamentally challenge them are often dismissed as radical or biased.
Wow, so these 5 filters work together to shape the news we get. often without anyone consciously deciding to mislead. It's baked into the system.
That's the core argument. It means that even with a free press, the range of acceptable debate can be surprisingly narrow, pre-filtered to support the status quo.
And you can really see this playing out, can't you? Like, think about how whistleblowers get treated in the media. Figures like Edward Snowden or Julian Assange.
Exactly. They're almost always framed in this simple binary, hero or traitor. There's very little room for nuance. And the frame that dominates often depends heavily on which sources are given prominence, usually government sources, and the prevailing ideology like national security concerns.
Snowden himself has talked about this, hasn't he? About media commercialization.
Yeah, he has. He's criticized how news outlets prioritize getting scoops or pushing counter-narratives from official sources over collaborating to report significant information that someone else revealed. He mentioned a kind of Fox News effect, where the narrative and its emotional impact sometimes seem more important than the underlying facts, especially when it serves a particular agenda. Assange and WikiLeaks face similar framing battles, constantly accused of bias or recklessness. It's always a battle for narrative control.
So the filters shape not just what stories are told, but how they're framed and whose voices get heard. And sometimes governments and powerful groups don't just rely on these filters. They engage in direct, covert operations to manipulate the narrative. The Bay of Pigs is a classic example. Right?
Oh, definitely. A textbook case of narrative management gone wrong, in a way. Leading up to and during the invasion in '61, U.S. media coverage, heavily influenced by official sources, painted a very specific picture.
What kind of picture?
A positive, heroic one. The U.S.-backed invaders were called Cuban Revolutionary Troops, rebels, patriots. Castro was the dictator. It framed them as freedom fighters, tapping right into that strong Cold War anti-communist feeling.
But the reality was
Very different.
totally different. The invasion was a swift, humiliating failure. It was over in 3 days. So you had this huge gap between the optimistic, heroic narrative being pushed and the stark military defeat on the ground.
How did that happen? Why the disconnect?
Several reasons. Journalists didn't have direct access, so they relied on biased sources, including government briefings, which likely spun the situation heavily. The Cold War climate made people want to believe the anti-Castro forces would succeed, and it seems government sources might have actively fed inflated or misleading info to build public support. It created these unrealistic public expectations. When it collapsed, it was a real shock and a lesson in how narratives can be built on shaky foundations during covert ops. It really shows that battle for narrative control in action. But influencing single events is one thing. What about more systemic, long-term manipulation of the media itself? That brings us to things like Operation Mockingbird.
Right, Operation Mockingbird. This refers to allegations and some confirmed activities of the CIA during the Cold War. The core claim is that the CIA secretly recruited hundreds of journalists, editors, and even media executives.
Recruited them to do what?
Several things, allegedly. To spread CIA-approved narratives, both domestically and abroad, to plant pro-US stories and counter-Soviet propaganda, and also just to gather intelligence through their media connections.
So using the press as an arm of intelligence and influence operations.
That's the allegation. Now, the full extent is debated, but the Church Committee investigations in 1975 did confirm the CIA had cultivated secret relationships with at least 50 American journalists. So, the intent to use the press for influence and intelligence gathering seems pretty clear, even if the full scale of Mockingbird as a single coordinated program is harder to pin down.
Still, even a 50 journalists with secret ties. That gives Bernays' invisible government a very real institutional face within the media itself. And this wasn't just about countering the Soviets, was it? Sometimes these operations served very specific economic interests.
Absolutely. The CIA's role often blurred the lines between national security and corporate interests. One source starkly calls the CIA a weapon to be wielded by Western capital.
Strong words. Is there evidence for that?
So look at Guatemala in 1954. The democratically elected president, Arbenz, passed land reforms that threatened the massive profits of the powerful American corporation, the United Fruit Company.
United Fruit, the Banana Republic Company.
That's the one. They lobbied the U.S. government hard. The CIA, under Director Alan Dulles, who had ties to United Fruit's law firm, by the way, orchestrated a coup. They ousted Arbenz and installed a right-wing dictator who immediately reversed the reforms and was much friendlier to U.S. business.
So overthrowing a democracy for a fruit company.
Essentially, yes. And often, sources say, the CIA would mislead even the US president about things like casualties in these operations to maintain secrecy and get the job done. Guatemala wasn't an isolated incident. This pattern of undermining democracy for corporate or strategic gain happened repeatedly during the Cold War. It's a clear example of an invisible government acting on behalf of powerful economic interests.
It really makes you question the official narratives behind so many historical events. Even things like the sinking of the Lusitania in World War I. There are disturbing questions there too, right? About potential manipulation.
There are, and it's highly controversial. The focus is often on Winston Churchill, who was First Lord of the Admiralty at the time. His desire to get the U.S. into the war against Germany was well known and explicit.
Explicit how?
There's a letter he wrote in early 1915, before the sinking. He said, "It is most important to attract neutral shipping to our shores, in the hope especially of embroiling the U.S. with Germany. And then, chillingly, and if some of it gets into trouble, better still."
Better still, wow.
Yeah. So critics take that statement, combine it with allegations that maybe naval escorts were withdrawn, or that warnings about U-boat activity in the area weren't fully passed on to the Lusitania's captain, and they build a case for essentially deliberate exposure or sacrifice. The idea being that the sinking and the resulting American outrage was perhaps seen as a necessary, if tragic, catalyst to bring the U.S. into the war.
Is there proof? A smoking gun.
No conclusive proof, no smoking gun. It remains a theory, a debate. But the existence of that letter, Churchill's known objective, it raises profound questions about how far leaders might go, what risks they might take with civilian lives to achieve strategic political aims. It blurs the line between strategy and a truly cynical engineering of events.
It really does. It makes you realize how layered manipulation can be. But okay, let's shift gears slightly. It's not just about these grand geopolitical events or covert ops. Bernays' engineering of consent is happening constantly, maybe more subtly, in the world of marketing and consumerism, shaping what we desire every single day.
Oh, absolutely. Commercial advertising is arguably where these techniques are most refined and pervasive. Think about luxury brands, for instance.
Right. What are they really selling? It's not just a handbag or a watch.
Exactly. They're selling emotion, aspiration, identity. The decision to buy a luxury item is rarely just logical. It's driven by feelings, by anticipated psychological rewards.
Like what kind of rewards?
Well, neurologically, the anticipation and act of buying luxury goods can trigger dopamine release in the brain's reward centers. That's the chemical associated with pleasure, motivation. It creates a literal dopamine loop. It feels good.
So the purchase itself becomes the reward.
Partly, yes. And studies show emotional fulfillment and self-reward are now huge motivators for luxury buyers, like cited by 68% and 57% respectively in one study. It's becoming less about just showing off status and more about how the purchase makes you feel about yourself.
So they're literally engineering desire by tapping into our brain chemistry. How do they do that?
Through a whole range of sophisticated tactics. Scarcity is a big one, making things seem rare, limited edition, hard to get. Exclusivity, too. That inherently increases desirability.
Because we want what we can't easily have.
Precisely. Then there's aspirational advertising showing these idealized lifestyles, associating the brand with success, beauty, sophistication. The product becomes a symbol. Owning it means you're closer to that ideal state.
And they use FOMO too, right? Fear of missing out.
Constantly. Limited editions, exclusive events, special access, all designed to create urgency. And social media amplifies this massively, showing you what others have that you don't. It plays right into our deep-seated needs for status and belonging.
And it all ties back to our sense of self, our identity. You're not just buying a thing, you're buying into a story the brand tells about people like you.
That's perfectly put. Luxury items are marketed as ways to boost self-esteem, to express who you are. One study found 57% see these items as reflections of their personality and lifestyle. You're buying into the narrative.
Can you give some specific examples? How do top brands do this?
Sure. Think about Louis Vuitton. They manage scarcity tightly, control distribution, do high-profile collaborations, use huge stars like Ronaldo, Messi, Zendaya. It keeps them aspirational, culturally relevant.
Okay, what about, say, Rolex?
Rolex cultivates this intense aura of elite status. They leverage perceived scarcity. Even though they make a lot of watches, they create waiting lists, making demand seem higher than supply. It fuels the desire.
And Apple. They're masters of branding.
Apple uses minimalist design, very strong emotional branding around creativity, innovation, empowerment. Their whole ecosystem is tightly integrated, making you feel part of an exclusive club, and their stores are designed for total brand immersion.
Right, and Chanel.
Chanel relies on incredible brand consistency, powerful storytelling. Coco Chanel's revolutionary life story is central, strict exclusivity, and iconic celebrity ambassadors. It creates this timeless, almost mythical allure. And behind all this, many brands are using neuromarketing, studying brain responses to ads, packaging, etc., to understand subconscious drivers and make their influence even more effective.
It's incredibly sophisticated. It shows how these principles permeate our everyday lives. But it goes beyond just buying things. These psychological tactics, the kind used in PSYOPS, are woven into daily life in broader ways, influencing how we think and feel, often without us clocking it.
That's right. And what's really key here is how these techniques target our basic psychological vulnerabilities, often bypassing our rational minds entirely.
Like using fear.
Exactly. Fear appeals are very common, messages that highlight danger or risk. They work best, psychologically, when they also offer a clear solution, something called an efficacy message, making you believe the proposed action works and that you can actually do it. That leads to danger control, where you take action.
But fear can also shut down thinking, right?
It can, especially in high stress or conflict situations. Fear can trigger the limbic system, the fight or flight response, and that can actually suppress activity in the prefrontal cortex, the rational part of the brain, making us more susceptible to manipulation.
So our own biology makes us vulnerable. What else?
Well, tapping into our reward systems, dopamine triggers. We talked about it with luxury goods, but it applies more broadly. Think about social conformity. Agreeing with a group can literally feel rewarding, activating dopamine pathways. Disagreeing, that can trigger an error signal in the brain. We're wired to want to fit in.
And manipulators exploit that.
They do. And they exploit emotional manipulation generally. Think about communications designed to provoke strong feelings, fear, anger, hope, outrage, often without solid evidence. This works because, as research shows, strong emotional responses suppress critical thinking.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine news channels constantly showing images of empty supermarket shelves during a supposed supply crisis. Maybe some panic buying started it, but the relentless focus amplifies the fear, pushing more people to panic buy, even if the underlying supply is okay. It bypasses rational assessment.
They create the reality they're reporting on, in a way.
Hmm.
What other cognitive tricks are used?
Attention manipulation, or what Robert Cialdini calls persuasion. This is about directing your focus before the main message. If someone gets you thinking about, say, scarcity or authority right before they make a request, you're more likely to agree because that concept is already primed in your mind.
Setting the stage mentally. Clever.
And then there's novelty. Our brains are hardwired to pay attention to sudden or unusual changes. It's an evolutionary survival mechanism. PSYOPS can exploit this by manufacturing unexpected events, crises, or dramatic revelations that capture attention and break normal patterns.
Like a timely leak or scandal.
Exactly. Imagine a damaging video about an official conveniently surfacing right when other negative news about them is breaking. The novelty and drama of the video can completely shift the public conversation, burying the other story. It's pure misdirection.
I've literally seen that happen.
Yeah.
And what about when everyone seems to be saying the same thing? All the media outlets, politicians.
That's a centralized narrative, and yeah, one source calls it a humongous red flag. When you see identical talking points everywhere, it creates a powerful echo chamber. It makes it really hard for dissenting views to get heard, and it pressures individuals to conform. It shuts down independent thinking.
It makes the official story feel like the only story.
Precisely. Another surprisingly effective tactic on a more personal level is simply using someone's name repeatedly in sales, customer service, even arguments. Hearing your name creates a subtle sense of connection, trust, importance. It bypasses the intellect, makes you feel seen, and can make you more receptive to influence. Alex, you're smarter than that. It primes you.
Oh yeah, I recognize that one. It feels personal, but it's a technique. What about invoking science? Studies show.
Ah, yes. Claiming science as a weapon, using phrases like, the science is settled, experts agree, data proves, as a kind of moral shield to shut down questions or debate. Science gets turned into a bludgeon, not a tool for ongoing discovery.
Especially when the science is actually complex or uncertain.
Exactly. It often involves exaggerating findings, ignoring contradictory studies, or presenting correlations as causation. It leverages the authority of science to stifle critical thought, particularly in fields where nuance is crucial, like health or social issues. The moment someone says the science is settled on a complex topic, your skepticism alarm should probably go off.
Good point. Sometimes, though, the manipulation isn't subtle at all. It can involve outright cruelty.
Sadly, yes, cruelty can be performative, a calculated act. It can evolve from attempts to gain control, where someone learns that harm is what gets them seen, what gets them compliance. It's not about connection, it's about dominance, often masking deep insecurity. It forces submission through fear or psychological pain.
And belief itself can be manipulated, right? People will believe confident lies over uncertain truths.
Absolutely. There's immense power in belief, divorced from truth. As one source puts it, a story repeated often enough with just enough conviction outlives the truth it buries. Belief often follows confidence, not truth. Lies can get standing ovations if they tap into what people want to believe, if they make them feel good or safe or validated. Once applause and group validation get involved, truth loses leverage. The emotional payoff trumps factual accuracy.
Which makes us incredibly vulnerable, especially if we're feeling unsafe or uncertain.
Precisely. This ties into things like trauma bonding. When you're craving safety, manipulation doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like guidance, like care, like home. The manipulator makes you feel chosen, protected, special, often using inconsistent reinforcement, mixing kindness with criticism, which creates a powerful, confusing bond. Control is easiest when people feel dependent and emotionally invested.
It hides in plain sight because it meets a deep need.
Exactly. And another powerful tool is control through guilt. Guilt is a potent emotional lever that bypasses logic. If someone understands your moral triggers, they can weaponize guilt to ensure compliance, making you feel responsible for their feelings or problems. It creates a kind of emotional servitude.
Wow. These tactics are everywhere, and they're deeply manipulative. And you're saying they aren't just used by individuals, but are embedded in our social systems, shaping us from the start.
That's a really important point. This isn't just about interpersonal manipulation, it's about systemic social control, often operating subtly through major institutions. Think about schooling and the hidden curriculum.
With the hidden curriculum.
It's the unstated lessons learned in school beyond academics. Mass public schooling, especially influenced by the Prussian model aimed at creating disciplined workers for industry, wasn't just about teaching reading and math. The hidden curriculum teaches things like obedience, respect for authority, punctuality, conformity, and competition. Through the very structure of school, bells, strict schedules, grading, tracking students, standardized tests, all these practices internalize certain norms and values, preparing students for hierarchical workplaces and subordinate roles in the economy. Foucault called it creating docile bodies, individuals conditioned to accept discipline and control. It engineers consent for a particular social order from a very young age.
So school itself subtly shapes us for compliance within the system. And does this systemic control continue into adulthood?
Definitely. Consider debt. For most people in the middle class today, debt is almost unavoidable. Student loans, mortgages, credit cards. While it can be a tool, our sources point out it's also a formidable mechanism of control.
Oh, so control.
Because being indebted means your future labor, your future time, is already claimed by someone else. It limits your freedom, your ability to take risks, to change careers, to challenge the system. It ties you to the need to earn, to repay. It's a modern form of bondage in a way, shaping life choices under constant pressure.
And this economic pressure, this concentration of wealth and debt, it translates into political power, doesn't it? The idea of a plutocracy.
Exactly. Plutocracy isn't just about rich people. It's when concentrated wealth systematically translates into political influence and power. This happens through campaign finance, lobbying, sure, but also control over information and narratives, owning media outlets, funding think tanks, shaping public discourse.
And does this actually affect policy?
Research consistently shows it does. The policy preferences of the wealthiest citizens have a strong correlation with actual laws passed, while the preferences of average citizens have very little independent impact. It creates a feedback loop. Wealth buys influence, influence shapes policy to favor wealth, which increases wealth concentration, and so on. It's Bernays' invisible government made manifest through economic power shaping political outcomes.
And to maintain this system, the people in power often try to divide the rest of us, keep us from uniting.
That's a classic tactic. One powerful way is the strategic manipulation of identity, especially racial identity. Elites can use race as a heat shield, promoting racial divisions to distract from underlying class exploitation that affects people across racial lines.
Pitting groups against each other.
Exactly. It creates a false dilemma, forcing people to choose between focusing on race or class, when in reality, they're often deeply intertwined. This fragmentation prevents the formation of broad, unified movements that could actually challenge the concentration of economic power. It keeps the focus on horizontal conflicts instead of the vertical power structure.
So constantly keeping us arguing amongst ourselves while the fundamental system remains unchanged. This reminds me of the criticisms leveled against groups like the World Economic Forum or concepts like the Great Reset.
Right.
There's significant criticism arguing that organizations like the WEF represent unelected, opaque bodies of global elites wielding undue influence over public policy, bypassing democratic accountability. Concerns are raised that concepts like stakeholder capitalism pushed by these groups might be a form of woke washing.
Woke washing, meaning?
Meaning, using the language of social responsibility, sustainability, and equity primarily as a public relations strategy to mask the continuation or even expansion of corporate power and wealth accumulation rather than driving genuine systemic change. Critics fear these initiatives could lead towards more centralized control and less individual autonomy, despite the positive framing.
So ultimately, it often circles back to the fundamental divide between the owner class and the working class. That's a core argument in several analyses. The owner class benefits when the much larger working class is divided. Think about friction between minimum wage workers and those earning slightly more hand. It distracts from the huge share of value captured by capital owners. Similarly, media narratives emphasizing things like generational preferences or the benefits of renting can subtly normalize conditions that primarily benefit landlords and investors, reinforcing a predatory, exploitative status quo. These are all ways consent is engineered for a system that disproportionately benefits a small elite.
Okay, this a lot to take in, from personal psychology to global systems. So let's pause here for a moment. Think about all these examples, the subtle nudges in ads, the big political narratives, the systemic pressures in this. What does this mean for you listening right now? Can you pinpoint one area in your own daily life where you've maybe noticed a subtle attempt to shape your beliefs or your actions, something you perhaps didn't consciously recognize until thinking about it now? Just take a second to reflect on that. We'll be right back to dive into how this plays out in the digital age.
All right, so if Bernays gave us the concept of an invisible government working through early mass media and PR, then in our digital age, you could say artificial intelligence, AI, has become its algorithmic architect. It's taken those principles and scaled them up massively.
How so? How do algorithms connect back to Bernays and, say, the Chomsky model?
Well, think about the recommendation algorithms on social media, YouTube, news sites. They are the ultimate gatekeepers now. Their main goal, maximize user engagement. Keep you scrolling, keep you watching.
Because engagement equals ad revenue.
Exactly. Which directly mirrors Chomsky's advertising filter. The economic driver shapes the content you see. And the data these AIs are trained on. It's full of existing societal biases, reflecting who already has power and voice online that connects to the ownership and sourcing filters. Plus, these systems are super vulnerable to manipulation by bots, coordinated campaigns. That's like a digital flak.
And we're seeing more and more non-human content online, right? The dead internet theory.
Yeah, that theory highlights the huge and growing volume of bot traffic online. And AI makes it incredibly cheap and easy to generate automated content, text, images, even realistic videos. It gets harder and harder to tell what's real, what's human, what's AI-generated propaganda.
So it's not just carefully crafted messages anymore. It's this overwhelming flood of content, a lot of it automated, creating this digital fog.
Precisely. AI tools allow disinformation campaigns to produce way larger quantities of content, covering more topics, hitting more niches than humans ever could. There was a documented case involving a Russian-linked site, dcweekly.org.
What do they do?
They used AI to rewrite news articles stolen from legitimate sources, adding specific slants like being critical of U.S. support for Ukraine. And they even used AI to generate completely fake stories, like one about President Zelensky buying luxury yachts, which actually got a lot of traction. The AI helped them maintain a veneer of authenticity by constantly churning out plausible-sounding content.
That's terrifying. And AI can make this stuff more persuasive too.
That's the other major concern. AI can analyze massive amounts of user data, your clicks, likes, viewing habits to create disinformation that's specifically tailored to reinforce existing biases. Content designed just for you to push your specific buttons, making it potentially much more convincing and harder for you to dismiss.
So it's personalized propaganda. That really is algorithmic manipulation of perception on a whole new level.
It is. Algorithms act as these incredibly powerful gatekeepers, deciding what you see and what you don't. Content likely to get high engagement, which is often stuff that's emotionally charged, controversial, polarizing, or tied to your group identity, sometimes called prime information, gets amplified. Other stuff gets pushed down or even shadow banned, hidden without you knowing why.
And this focus on engagement has emotional consequences, right?
Huge ones. It leads to sentiment and emotional manipulation at scale because algorithms prioritize emotionally provocative content. Constantly being exposed to it can directly influence your mood, maybe increase anxiety or depression, fuel outrage cycles, and definitely deepens polarization in society. Platforms literally have the power now to manipulate collective mood.
Which leads to things like filter bubbles and echo chambers where we only see things we already agree with.
Exactly. That algorithmic personalization can create these filter bubbles, limiting your exposure to diverse viewpoints, making you think your perspective is the only valid one or the most common one. It contributes to ideological segregation. There are real concerns about algorithms creating these separate, personalized realities for each of us.
And can these algorithms actually lead people down dangerous paths towards extremism?
That's another serious concern, the potential for radicalization pathways. The worry is that recommendation algorithms, trying to keep you engaged, might lead you down rabbit holes towards increasingly extreme or conspiratorial content. Some research suggests this might be more pronounced for users leaning towards certain ideologies, possibly because extreme content can be particularly engaging for some demographics.
And underpinning all of this is the whole business model of surveillance capitalism.
Right, Shoshana Zuboff's term. It's crucial. The idea is that these platforms aren't just providing a service, their core business is monitoring user behavior in incredible detail. Not just what you click or buy, but subtle things, how fast you scroll, where your mouse hovers, maybe even analyzing facial expressions via cameras. This is the behavioral surplus.
And what do they do with this surveillance data?
They feed it into massive AI systems, machine intelligence, to create prediction products. These products forecast your future behavior, what you'll click next, what you'll buy, your political leaning, even your emotional state. And these predictions, they're the real product, sold to advertisers, political campaigns, anyone who wants to influence behavior in what Zuboff calls behavioral futures markets.
So they're not just selling ads, they're selling certainty about us.
Yeah.
About what we'll do next.
Pretty much. And they design the platforms to keep us hooked, to generate more of this data. Think of the scrolling dopamine loop on social media. It's engineered addiction. It keeps us busy, 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 no time to think, creating this direct feedback loop between inner psyche and outer system. It fundamentally affects our autonomy.
And the control is subtle, isn't it? Not direct orders.
Very subtle. It's a shift from explicit commands to implicit nudges. They use our own subconscious reactions, clicks, dwell time to infer what we want and gently guide us, often without us even being aware we're being steered.
It's like an invisible hand,
Yeah.
but algorithmic. Some people even use philosophical terms for this, right? Like digital demiurges.
Yeah, drawing on Gnosticism, the idea is that big tech and AI are creating this sort of flawed artificial reality governed by these powerful algorithms, the digital demiurges. Surveillance capitalism becomes a kind of debased gnosis where knowledge about us is used not for enlightenment, but for prediction and control, leading to massive epistemic inequality. They know everything about us. We know almost nothing about how they operate.
So if we pull all this together, Bernays' original vision of an invisible government shaping belief finds its maybe ultimate expression in these automated systems. Systems that manage, predict, and nudge our thoughts and feelings at scale, making it incredibly hard to tell genuine choice from engineered consent. What does this do to us? To our ability to think freely?
It has profound implications. We see the erosion of free will manifesting in things like self-censorship. There's this pressure, often unspoken, to conform, to shrink your thoughts, to dim your mind, just to avoid conflict or being labeled difficult or arrogant for daring to think differently. Self-censorship becomes survival in some online and offline spaces, and that stifles the friction and challenge needed for real progress.
And it makes it harder to even know what's true anymore.
Absolutely. There's this growing sense that everything we have been taught has been a lie, and the difficulty, the nightmare of the Great Awakening is letting go of deeply held beliefs, even if they're flawed. Because as we discussed, belief often follows confidence, not truth. Charismatic lies can feel more compelling than complex, uncomfortable truths, especially when they offer easy answers or a sense of belonging. Truth loses leverage when emotional resonance takes over.
So we end up trapped in narratives, potentially ones designed to manipulate us, because leaving them feels unsafe or means admitting we were wrong.
Exactly. And remember, manipulation often doesn't feel like manipulation when you're craving safety. It feels like guidance, like care, like home. It preys on our need to feel chosen, protected, special. This makes the whole system incredibly resilient. Power structures are very good at protecting themselves.
How do they do that?
As one source notes, power doesn't play by the rules, it writes them. The system often pretends to reform while ensuring it remains untouched at its foundation. We see performative gestures, surface-level changes that create the illusion that it cares, but the core power dynamics remain. The system protects itself first, always. Recognizing that resilience is key to understanding why real change is so difficult.
Okay, so given all this, the subtle psych tactics, the systemic pressures, the algorithmic control, what can we as individuals listening to this actually do? It sounds pretty overwhelming. How do we reclaim any sense of sovereignty?
It is overwhelming, but the first most crucial step is awareness. Just recognizing these mechanisms, seeing the strings, is itself an act of reclaiming power. It allows you to start questioning.
Questioning what specifically?
Questioning the dominant narratives about success, about happiness, about what's important, resisting the manipulative influences you now recognize. Actively, consciously shaping your life based on values you've actually thought about and chosen, not ones that have been sold to you. It means renouncing internalized metrics of self-worth pushed by society or social media and trying to detach from manufactured desires created by advertising and algorithms.
So it's an internal process of defining your own terms.
Largely, yes. But it's not about becoming isolated. Authentic freedom isn't found in just rejecting everything. It's relational and contextual. It's about mindfully integrating your self-determination with your connections to others and your ethical commitments. It's an ongoing practice of critical thinking, questioning the world around you, and making intentional choices, however small, to live more authentically within these powerful systems.
It's about becoming a more conscious participant rather than just being swept along.
Exactly. It's about taking back the reins of your own mind as much as possible. Edward Bernays himself asked this question way back in 1928. If we understand the mechanism and motives of the group mind, is it not possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without their knowing it? Now think about that question in today's world, a world driven by hyper-personalized algorithms, where control is automated, invisible, constant. It forces us to ask ourselves, really ask, how much of your reality, the things you want, the opinions you hold, the choices you make every day, how much of it is truly your own, and how much is being meticulously, algorithmically engineered?
So today we've traveled quite a distance, from Edward Bernays and his early, frankly, shocking ideas about engineering consent in the 1920s, all the way to how those ideas echo and are amplified in our digital world right now.
Right.
We've seen how this invisible government he talked about has evolved using sophisticated media strategies, psychological tactics, and now these incredibly powerful algorithms that literally shape our online experience and perception.
And the goal here isn't to make everyone cynical or paranoid. It's really about empowerment. Understanding how these mechanisms work, from PR filters to dopamine loops to algorithmic nudges, gives you the tools to think more critically. It's about questioning the narratives you encounter, whether from politicians, advertisers, or your social media feed, and consciously choosing your own path, your own beliefs, in a world that's constantly trying to choose them for you. Your autonomy, your ability to think for yourself, that's your most valuable asset.
Absolutely. And we really want to hear what you think about all this.
Yeah.
Has digging into the engineering of consent changed how you see your everyday life, your news consumption, maybe even your own desires or decisions? Did anything we discussed really stand out or spark an aha moment?
Yeah.
Let us know down in the comments. We'd love to continue the conversation there.
Yeah, definitely share your thoughts.
And if you found this deep dive valuable, if it made you think, please give us a like. Subscribe for more deep dives into how our world really works. And maybe share this with a friend, someone else who enjoys thinking critically and asking the tough questions.
Keep digging. Keep questioning.
Until next time, get exploring.